There's always been something about the moon, right? That glow in the dark, it just it makes you think, makes you wonder.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise that all over the world, different cultures, they've come up with these incredible stories about it. So, ready to dive into some moon myths and folklore.
Absolutely. What always gets me is how, even though these stories come from totally different places and cultures,
Right.
they often have these common threads, like, these shared human experiences.
Yeah, it's like we're all trying to make sense of the same moon, just in our own way.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with, the biggest question. Where did the moon even come from? I mean, we've got origin stories here from, the Americas, Oceania, ancient Egypt. It's like this universal need to know.
Totally. It's human nature to want explanations, and way back then, without telescopes and all that, myths were their way of explaining what they saw up there.
It's like their science, in a way.
Right, exactly.
So we've got this Native American myth where the moon's the daughter of the sun and the earth.
Like a celestial family, huh?
Right. And then there's this one from Oceania. The moon's this, giant magical flounder leaping out of the ocean into the sky.
That's a visual.
Yeah.
And it shows how important nature was to their beliefs, The ocean, the sky, it's all connected.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then you've got the ancient Egyptians, always going to be a little intense.
Right.
They believed the moon was the eye of the goddess Hathor. She lost it somehow, and there it was, in the sky.
See, even though these stories are so different, a flounder, an eye, they all make the moon something we can relate to. It's not just this, random object anymore.
It's got a story, a history.
Exactly. And that makes the whole cosmos feel less scary, more familiar.
Like it's part of us, not just something we're looking at.
Right. And speaking of feeling connected, that brings us to all those lunar deities, the gods and goddesses linked to the moon.
Oh, yeah. And it's amazing how each culture's deity reflects their values, their beliefs about the moon's power, right?
Absolutely.
Take change from Chinese mythology. She starts out controlling water, healing people, and then, boom, banished to the moon.
Which, by the way, is a whole other story and a big part of why they celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival, even to this day.
It's amazing how these ancient stories are still with us.
I know, right? But it just shows how important the moon's phases were to their beliefs. I mean, it's constantly changing, waxing, waning.
So they thought the deity's power was changing, too.
It's possible, right? Their personality, their role, all tied to this lunar cycle.
Fascinating. And then you've got the Greek goddess, Selene, and the Roman version, Luna, both known for their beauty, riding across the night in a chariot, all dramatic.
Talk about an entrance. But why always the connection to femininity, I wonder?
It's true. Across so many cultures, the moon's linked to feminine energy, grace, elegance.
Well, think about it. The moon, with its phases, it's this symbol of cycles, right? And life on Earth, birth, growth, even decay.
Yeah.
It all follows these patterns.
And those cycles were traditionally seen as feminine.
Exactly. The power of creation, of constant renewal. It's a powerful image, and it makes you understand those ancient beliefs a little better, don't you think?
I do. So we've gone from the moon's creation to these powerful deities who embody its essence. But I have a feeling things get a little more, shall we say, intense when we start talking about the full moon. Things definitely get a little wilder when we talk about the full moon.
Yeah, a little wilder for sure. I mean, think about it. The full moon's like this burst of light right in the darkness.
It's going to make you a little jumpy, don't you think?
Well, yeah, maybe that's why there are so many superstitions and myths about it. It's like all our anxieties just get amplified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The whole werewolf thing, we found stories from all over, and it's always those little details that get me. Wednesday night, summer, bam, werewolf.
It's primal, isn't it? This fear of losing control. Something wild and untamed taking over.
Yeah, it makes you think twice about howling at the moon, right? But okay, enough about werewolves. What about the more, let's say, practical full moon beliefs, like all those money rituals?
Yes, because who couldn't use a little extra cash flow, especially if the moon's involved.
Right. And it wasn't just about attracting wealth either. It was about holding on to what you had.
Yeah.
We found these rituals that were crazy specific, down to the exact type of coin you had to use.
People were really looking for ways to control their destiny, weren't they? Especially when it came to something as unpredictable as money.
And speaking of control, what about all the things you weren't supposed to do under a full moon?
Oh, you mean the don't even think about it list?
Exactly. Don't cut your nails. Don't start a new job. Just stay out of trouble, basically.
I guess our ancestors were saying, look, just lay low for a night or two. Let the moon do its thing.
Which actually makes me wonder, is that where we get the whole must be a full moon saying, when things just get a little crazy.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection. This idea that the full moon brings out the unexpected, the heightened emotions. But here's the thing. We also have to think about confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
It means we tend to notice things that confirm what we already believe. So if you believe weird stuff happens during a full moon, you're probably going to see it everywhere.
That makes sense. But what about all those stories about animals going a little nuts during a full moon? Is there any truth to that, or is it all just myth?
Well, there's actually some evidence that the moon can affect certain animal behaviors, things like sleep patterns, mating cycles, and there have even been studies showing an increase in dog bites when it's a full moon.
See, I knew it. There's got to be some kind of lunar influence going on. But hey, speaking of amazing lunar events, let's talk about eclipses.
Because when the moon just seems to vanish or it turns that blood red color, our ancestors had stories for days.
Oh yeah, talk about a celestial showstopper. But before we get into the myths, can you give us a quick, science refresher? Like, why does the moon actually change color during a total lunar eclipse?
Sure thing. It's all about the sunlight. It gets refracted through the Earth's atmosphere and casts this reddish light on the moon, like a giant sunset, but on the moon.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool. So no magic, just science. But I can see why people would come up with some pretty wild explanations back then.
Absolutely, especially since eclipses were often seen as, bad omens. Like in ancient Mesopotamia, they thought a lunar eclipse was a direct threat to the king.
Whoa, really? Did they, lock him up or something?
Not quite, but they would actually temporarily replace the king with someone else, just in case.
Talk about ancient risk management. It's like they really believed the eclipse could change their whole world.
It just shows how much power they gave to those celestial events.
Yeah.
And then there's that Hindu myth with Rahu, this demon whose head chases the sun and moon trying to eat them. And when he does, it causes an eclipse.
Okay, that's both fascinating and slightly terrifying at the same time. It's a good reminder that eclipses haven't always been seen as these cool astronomical events. They could be pretty scary.
It's no doubt. The fear of the unknown, the disruption of the natural order, those were big anxieties. But it's interesting, not every culture saw eclipses as purely negative.
So not everyone was hiding under a table when the moon went dark?
Not at all. Some cultures actually saw eclipses as a positive thing, like the Hupa and Luiseno tribes. They thought of eclipses as a time for healing, a chance to start fresh.
Huh, interesting. So even when there's fear, there's also this, opportunity.
Exactly. It's all about perspective, right?
Wow. Totally. And speaking of different perspectives, let's switch gears from all this doom and gloom to something a little more, hopeful. Ever heard the saying, once in a blue moon? What about those rare lunar events?
Oh yeah, blue moons. There's definitely something magical about them.
It's like anything is possible under a blue moon, right? But first, what exactly is a blue moon? It's not like the moon actually turns blue, right?
No, it doesn't, unfortunately. It's more about the timing. You know how most seasons have 3 full moons? Well, a blue moon happens when you get a 4th full moon in that same season.
So it's a calendar quirk that makes it rare. But it's not just about the rarity, is it? It's about what people believed those rare moments represented.
Right. Like for many cultures, a blue moon was a time when the barrier between worlds was thin. A time for powerful spiritual energy.
Like a cosmic window of opportunity.
Exactly. We found some Native American traditions that say it's a powerful time for connecting with spirits, making wishes. It makes sense, right? We look for meaning in these unusual events, something bigger than ourselves.
It's like the universe is saying, hey, pay attention. Something special is happening. And while we're talking about lunar phases and what they mean, we can't forget about the new moon.
Ah, yes, the new moon. The flip side of the full moon, you could say. Where the full moon might make you want to stay inside and avoid making any big decisions, the new moon is all about new beginnings, fresh starts.
Time to set some intentions.
Exactly. We found traditions all over the world encouraging people to start new projects, new relationships during a new moon, especially if it fell on the first day of the week, that it's like, boom, success guaranteed.
So it seems like no matter what the moon is doing up there, waxing, waning, turning blood red, we humans are always looking for meaning in it, trying to find a story that resonates with our own lives.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? From those ancient myths to the superstitions we still carry today, it shows how deeply connected we are to the moon. It's this constant source of wonder and inspiration. And it reminds us that we're all storytellers at heart, trying to make sense of the universe and their place in it.
Beautifully said. So next time you look up at the moon, don't just see a big rock in the sky. Remember the stories, the myths, the hopes and fears that we've been talking about. And who knows, maybe you'll even come up with your own interpretation, your own lunar legend. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.